case where you had an 18-year-old who possessed and distributed hundreds of images of 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds, and you gave him, frankly, a slap on the wrist sentence of 3 months.
Senator,
do you regret it?
I don't remember whether it was distribution or possession. In
it was
the law,
both. Do you regret it?
In the law, there are different crimes that people commit.
Judge, you
in
gave
this
him
area.
3 months. My question is, do you regret it or not?
Senator, what I regret is that in a hearing about my qualifications to be a justice on the Supreme Court, we've spent a lot of time focusing on this small subset of my sentences, and I've tried to explain.
You regret that
many
we're focusing on
times-
your cases? I don't understand.
No. I'm talking about the fact that you're talking about
Child pornography
7
cases?
very serious cases.
I'm glad we agree on that. Don't you think we should be focusing on that?
Some of which involve conduct that I sentence people to 25, 30 years.
3 months in this case, Judge. Do you regret it? You haven't answered my question yet.
Senator,
do you regret this sentence?
Hello and welcome to another episode of wjlive, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Michael Austin, the supervising reporter here at the Western Journal, and today I'm joined with, whatever. Next to me right here is Abby Liebing, one of the reporters here at the Western Journal, another one of the reporters here. The clip you just saw was from the recently, they just ended yesterday, the congressional hearings over Biden's new Supreme Court nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yep.
Did I
KBJ.
said it correctly? Her name's beautiful. I don't mean any disrespect. I keep messing it up. But we'll call her KBJ for the rest of the episode. But yeah, so KBJ. So there's been a lot of controversy this past week over Biden's SCOTUS pick, her history, her judicial history, the rulings, specifically when it comes to cases that deal with child porn and the sexual abuse of children. So we're going to run through kind of all the hearings, KBJ's history for you, and why some people are really upset over this nomination, why some people believe that, although it looks like she's going to be confirmed, why they believe that she absolutely should not be.
Yeah, so to give a little bit of background on her, she was put on the U.S. District Court in D.C. by Barack Obama. Early
Not a good start.
Yeah, early in his presidency, he put her on that district court, which is one of the most powerful courts in the country. And so it wasn't shocking that Biden, picked her.
Once he narrowed it down to, I will only select a black woman.
Exactly.
She immediately went to the top of the list,
There she
handpicked by
is.
Obama. Yeah.
Yeah, so she checked all the boxes. And so as this hearing unfolded, naturally, despite her protestations that not just one case can define her qualifications, the senators went largely over a lot of her history with some of these cases, particularly, highlighting all of her views on, the big issues.
Yes.
What are your issues on abortion, on men and women, on these child pedophilia cases? And so for a little bit of background on her, she is pro-choice. No surprise there, since she's a Biden pick. Yeah. She deigned to not say what a woman is, and so her whole view on that, on the whole sexual spectrum, is pretty questionable. Yeah. And seems to be pretty progressive. And then, of course, these pedophilia cases, which are shocking,
yeah,
disturbing, because she. In two specific cases, but also in others, she gave some pretty low sentences to people who were in possession of child porn, and another man who was intending to go cross state lines to go meet a 9-year-old for a sexual encounter. And so those are the two cases that she got really nailed on during the hearings, because she gave extraordinarily low sentences to these people.
She went for for close to the absolute minimum sentencing in both cases, and I believe in both cases there were federal recommendations for the sentencing to be way more, like several years more, and she ended up going with in one case, what was it, 3 months or 6 months?
3 months.
3 months in one case. So
mere 3 months.
So it's super shocking. But all these ideas sort of tie together. And so what we're going to start with is how she responded to a very basic, very simple question. What is a woman? We have a clip we're going to run for you of her being asked that question, and here was her response.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
The meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Can't define woman.
Can't define woman. Not in that. The way she says it is kind of shocking because she's like, well, how could I possibly define that in this context? No one can.
Yeah, there's a really funny meme going around. Unfortunately, we didn't pull it up for the show today, but there's a really funny meme going around where, they're delivering a baby in the doctor's office. The mom's going like, oh, is it a boy or a girl? And then the doctor's going, how am I supposed to know? I'm not a biologist. So it's just the insanity that our politics have gotten to. And, this is a political ideology that tells us that, gender is fluid. And what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? Well, really nothing. If you say you're a woman, that means you're a woman. So obviously KBJ, she buys into that narrative. And that means, as this Leah Thomas stuff gets more out of control, as more kind of biological men entering women's sports, as that becomes a bigger issue. If a case dealing with that issue comes to the Supreme Court, well, we now know probably where one of the members of the court will rule.
Right, exactly. So she's probably going to, it seems, always rule in favor of more LGBT rights and gender fluidity, which then opens just an entire can of worms in that whole area because there's such a push, not just for the rights of LGBTQ plus people, but there's a whole push for, experimentation, sexual experimentation and exploration. And, if you're unsure, all the doors are open to you. You can do whatever you want to find your sexual identity.
Yes.
Which I think then plays into the porn problem.
Yes. And we should be, I want to be really clear and really explicit. This belief that I can't really define what a woman is, it is directly tied to the abuse of children. We're seeing that connection play out in schools across the country. Because we can't define what a woman is, we are now teaching children that, well, you can be whatever you want, maybe you need to explore, and then that idea is getting connected to sexuality, and that's why in schools across the country, we've done numerous reports on how pornographic materials that are meant to be educational are being found in school libraries. Kids are being taught, you need to experiment with sex, you need to experiment with your identity, they're getting confused. This is serious stuff, and it's directly tied to these ideas that she's promoting. And then it just so happens that she also has a really disturbing judicial history when it comes to child porn offenders, which doesn't help that case.
Yeah, no, not at all. Particularly because, so there was a young man who was in possession. His last name's Hawkins. He was 18. Yep. This is the case that she presided over as a judge, and he was in possession and also distributed child porn. And so he was the one who got only a 3-month sentence from KBJ, even though the prosecution asked for a 2-year sentence. And he has since then, got out of prison, went back to watching and distributing child porn. Yeah. But actually, one of the in the reporting, one of the arguments for the defense of Hawkins was that he was from a religious home, and this was an expression of his repressed homosexuality, was watching child porn.
So, the right, the left has long, criticized the right, saying, "Oh, homosexuality has nothing to do with pedophilia. How dare you say that?" And I do think those things are not connected. Like there's not a strong connection there. Right. When you get into the total umbrella of LGBT and you talk about accepting all kinds of different sexualities, then you could start to see a bit of a connection there. But when it comes to someone just being gay, no, that is not a predictor of them being a pedophile whatsoever. That being said, that's the case that the lawyer made for this kid. And it leaded to KBJ giving him a super light sentence. So our leftists, is the left now promoting the idea that gays are pedophiles? Like that's literally the direction that they went in with her past ruling. It's insanity that this happened. And once the left catches wind of this, I'm very interested to see how they deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're just hoping for it to blow over and that no one will pick up on it.
Yeah.
Because that is a huge problem.
Yes.
To have to have the LGBT community and child porn walking hand in hand with each other. That is a huge problem.
She made that connection. It is not us making that connection. I mean, if anything, people like us have been very charitable.
Yeah.
To a lot of the gay rights movement. We're a Christian organization here at the Western Journal, so there are certain objections we have to certain things that the gay rights movement believes in. But that being said, we don't think they're pedophiles. But apparently that's what KBJ thinks.
Yeah, she's like, well, they are connected.
Yeah.
But as she continued to tell Senator Josh Hawley during the hearing, these cases kept coming up again and again, and she kept saying, well, I can't believe that my qualifications to be on the Supreme Court are being evaluated by these past cases. And I think everyone was kind of like, well, what else would we evaluate you by? You're a judge. That's like telling someone in a job interview, I don't know why you're evaluating me based on my resume. How dare you?
Yes, and they kept, Republicans kept hitting her on this. Like, you were really light on sentencing in all of these areas. We have another clip of basically an exchange she had with Lindsey Graham where they're talking about, the types of sentencing that this 18-year-old Hawkins got for distributing so much child porn. So I think, we're going to pull
In comes the internet. On the internet, with one click, you can receive, you can distribute tens of thousands. You can be doing this for 15 minutes, and all of a sudden, you are looking at 30, 40, 50 years in prison.
Good. Good.
I understand.
Absolutely good. I hope you are.
To do.
Good.
Allow her to finish, please.
I hope you go to jail for 50 years if you're on the internet trolling for images of children and sexual exploitation.
I mean, just good. Look at how passionately she was defending the idea that, well, if you just look at child porn, if you just kind of distribute it on a blog, why would you get 20, 30, 40, 50 years in jail?
Why?
Super passionate. She was super passionate about defending that position. I mean, that tells you ideologically where she's at, and that she's operating from a worldview that, we haven't seen in American politics for up until this point.
Right. And it's just concerning to think about her, defending that, but then also kind of the whole society that goes behind her, because, I mean, her thinking isn't original. It didn't just come out of the air. That is just starting to really condone porn.
Yes.
And even child porn. And, there's arguments out there that, child pornography does not mean, if you watch child porn, that does not mean that you're a pedophile. Right. That there's a distinct divide.
Doesn't mean you're going to go out there and abuse children.
Right.
That's the argument that a lot of left-wing news outlets have been making when they've been fact-checking Josh Hawley. It's the argument that Reason magazine, a libertarian magazine, was making, and we'll talk about that article in a bit.
Right. Which, I mean, it's technically true that if you watch child porn, that doesn't necessitate that you are going to go molest a child.
And statistically, those things aren't necessarily connected.
No.
That's true in a lot of cases.
They are not. But does watching child porn make you an enabler of the child molestation industry?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, especially distributing it. But,
exactly.
I mean, even in being someone that views child porn, you are creating, and this is what you're getting at, but you're creating an incentive for more people to create more child porn so that child porn can get more views. That's what you were doing. You are taking part in the rape of children when you view child porn, when you distribute it. So yeah, a lot of conservatives think that you should be getting 30, 40, 50 years at least.
Right. But, so much of the left is just saying that is so overly harsh. They're just watching pornography.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's just a whole skewed idea in general of our society, that people are so accepting of porn now.
Yeah.
And that it's so openly promoted, even, on TV shows. It's just, that's just what people do. It's just normal to watch pornography.
Yeah, and not to get too far off topic, but you can make the same argument that just, regular, the porn industry in general, by consuming porn, it's an industry that is known to exploit women. Holds up, it's very tightly connected with the sex trafficking industry, and you're helping prop up those industries when you view that material. But anyway.
No, exactly. Yeah. And it's a cultural problem. And then when you have people like KBJ coming to the Supreme Court, I mean, no one should be absolutely shocked by her views because, she's a product of the culture. But it is so much more concerning that someone who is going to be on the powerful Supreme Court deciding definitions of women, definitions of child pornography, and things that are culturally and law defining, that she thinks these things. I mean, that should be deeply concerning to every parent.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, and these arguments, you're seeing a lot of, one of the big narratives coming out, and this was a fact check that I believe Washington Post, New York Times, and Reason magazine, they all did, of Hawley's objections and Republicans' objections to her record, was, well, this minimum sentencing for these sorts of offenses. That's the way that kind of most judges in our system are headed, Democrat, Republican, or otherwise. She's not in the minority by giving minimum sentences in these issues. And, Hawley's response to that, our response to that, many people's response to that would be, that doesn't make it okay. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Right. But then there's always, they're just, everyone says, Josh Hawley's just so punitive and just so harsh. Yeah. And, these people need to be given second chances, which is just, it's incorrect thinking.
Yeah.
And honestly, to go to prison for a couple years for distributing child porn is not the worst thing that could happen to you. People want to frame it as, we're putting heads on pikes like we're in medieval England, but we're not. It is a natural consequence. Now, can sentences be, can they be overly harsh sometimes? Yes. And that is up to the judge. That is why we have judges, is to have that discretion and that decision of, let me look at the crime, let me look at the circumstances, and decide accordingly. Everyone wants to act like the law is just like its own little thing, just off as an independent thing, and no one can control it. But that's not how it works.
Right.
And KBG is evidence of that. She is a judge. It is her job to administer the law.
Yes, and it's just going. You know what? If you feel as a judge that the sentencing guidelines aren't correct, or the laws should be changed so that, we give less of a sentence for this. You got to wait for those laws to change, and then you enforce them when they do change.
Yes.
It is not your job, and we'll speak more to this later in the episode, but this is an issue that she's now joining the Supreme Court, because it is, a lot of these left-wing judges, they believe it's their job to change the law, to interpret the law in a new way that better fits the times. That's not your job. Your job is to, enforce the law from the bench. That's what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sadly, everyone is starting to question our Supreme Court justices, sometimes rightly so, in how they are enforcing the law.
Yes.
Especially, the past couple of years have just been a lot of confirmation hearings. And a lot of people starting to look to the Supreme Court and wake up to the fact that it is almost all powerful at this point. And so it is very important who we're putting on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And then how are they going to rule on cases? What are their beliefs? And how is that going to affect their interpretation of the law?
And both sides are taking a very, much more intensive invested interest in these hearings when it comes to, right-wing appointees and left-wing appointees for different reasons.
Yeah.
The right wants to preserve the court as it was meant to be in the Constitution. These guys interpret the law, and then if we want to change the law, we got Congress for that. And that's not what the left wants. The left wants to take over the court. That's why they fight so vociferously against any constitutionalist, any originalist judge being put on there. And that's why they really went after Kavanaugh. They really went after ACB. And they're really defending KBJ, even though, you know, we're really just going after her record from the bench. They went after, and this speaks to another point that we were going to address, which is the Washington Post, and the left in general has been saying this, but the Washington Post editorial board, they put out an article this past week that basically made the case that Judge Kavanaugh in his confirmation hearings was treated better than KBJ. That Republicans are being harder on KBJ than Democrats were being on
Which
Kavanaugh.
is just false, because the difference is senators are asking KBJ, they are seriously criticizing past rulings.
Yes.
Which, yeah, you know, that can be mean.
Right.
But Brett Kavanaugh was called a rapist.
Yes.
And that is 10 times harsher, worse, and more, and just seriously damaging.
So just to let you decide for yourself, you know, you kind of those clips from Hawley, those clips from Lindsey Graham's questioning, that was kind of the harsher end of how the confirmation hearing has gone for KBJ. We have a compilation for you of how the media, of how politicians were acting, what they were saying about Kavanaugh during the Kavanaugh hearings. Take a look and decide for yourself who was treated worse.
But really, guess who's perpetuating all of these kinds of actions? It's the men in this country. And I just want to say to the men in this country, just shut up and step up.
It's going to be about, it comes down to credibility, to your point, Gail, and it's going to be about listening to what each party has to say, but I believe her.
And the only good thing, literally the only good thing that I can see coming out of this is that Dr. Ford becomes an American hero.
Her testimony today was a towering act of courage given the trauma she survived. Her grace and composure under unimaginable pressure, which she owed no one, was stunning.
If Dr. Ford would have been that angry on the stand and would have talked back to somebody questioning her, women aren't supposed to do that, but he can get away with it.
So you're seeing on display a metaphor of like what this party is, and just basically just ignorant white men.
Up on that committee said, yeah, but we want our guy on the Supreme Court, and that's you, Brett. That doesn't mean you're guilty, but please, save your indignation that finally someone is taking one woman's accusation of sexual assault seriously.
Yeah, funny how that one woman just so happened to be that one case when they took it seriously just happened to have no evidence behind it, and it happened to be in one of the biggest, you know, confirmation hearings we've had in a long time.
Yeah.
Given the circumstances with Trump and how that was the seat that was not the seat that got held over from Obama. Never mind. But still, that was a huge deal. You know, they were talking like this would forever change the court. And by the way, Kavanaugh has not been a right-wing extremist from the bench.
No, he's actually been disappointingly centrist for Republicans.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's not like all of our hopes and dreams were fulfilled.
But, you know, all of those people, politicians, Kamala Harris, you know, pretty much I can't remember a Democrat other than maybe a couple of the centrists that didn't basically treat Kavanaugh like he was a rapist, talk about him like he was a guilty rapist.
Oh yeah, it was all about holding up Dr. Ford as, you know, the survivor of sexual abuse, which I want to be clear. Sexual abuse and sexual accusations, you know, I think the right sometimes has a tendency to gloss over them, and they should be taken seriously, but they should be taken seriously when there is evidence.
Yes.
And when there is real cause. And in this case, that did not seem to be the case.
And there were a lot, you know, towards the beginning. I do remember a good amount of conservatives that were like, okay, let's sit back. Actually, the Republicans looked into it. Like,
yeah, they were like, if we have a sexual assaulter going on the bench, we need to pull that real quick.
let's figure out what the truth is. They did that, you know, and then I think there's this great article if you want to really see how ridiculous the Christine Blasey Ford accusations were. Go to the Federalist, read 21 reasons not to believe Christine Blasey Ford's claims about Justice Kavanaugh. They just list off all these reasons. You know, she changed her story a million times. Her friends said that they didn't believe, you know, the story.
Yeah.
She didn't start, you know, the first reported case of her talking about this was as Kavanaugh was coming into prominence.
Yeah.
It was just all very convenient. And there have been serious incentives, serious rewards that she's gotten for speaking out on this.
Right.
They have treated her like a hero. And yeah, that is a lot worse than how KBJ is being treated.
So much worse. And I mean, for anyone who remembers a couple years ago during the Kavanaugh hearings, just the the gravity that the media gave to it, and
Yes.
just honestly, if you go back and watch the videos,
Yeah.
it was really, I mean, it was a cage fight. It was messy. It was not pretty, and it was a real show that the Democrats were just willing to, you know, do whatever it took to take someone down.
Well, and polling wise, that whole event ended up being a huge win for the right and a huge loss for the left and a huge loss for mainstream media outlets.
Right.
You know, trust in those outlets had been declining for several years before that, but you really, in that polling from that time, I'll have to go back and look at exactly what it was, but I remember that the polling really started taking a shift.
Oh,
then.
yeah.
Like, oh yeah, no, I don't trust the media because obviously they're not telling me both sides of the story on this Kavanaugh stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, but in the case of the KBJ hearings, yeah, were they hard on her? Yes.
Yes.
Was it rightly so? Probably. But even if it was unmerited, hearings are supposed to be critical and examining. This isn't just like a little, you know, let's get together and just make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally for both sides of the political spectrum, it should be, all right, we are going to seriously examine and really turn up the heat and the pressure on whoever you're looking to put on the Supreme Court. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
But as soon as that happens, everyone, you know, is just like, oh, they're so terrible and heartless and soulless.
And whether you believe it's unfair or not, these criticisms coming from the right now are specifically about her record. The criticisms of Kavanaugh were all about these rape accusations, and sexual assault accusations that, you know, the Christine Blasey Ford ones are extremely suspect. You know, they don't even meet a preponderance of evidence standard of proof. You know, there's not even enough evidence to say, oh, well, you know, there's a lot of evidence, so it's probably true. No, it's not even that. And yeah, it was just completely baseless. Oh yeah, then all of the other accusers came forward after that all ended up turning out to be grifters that were just trying to cash in on the movement.
They were just trying to get the spotlight.
But there was the Kavanaugh, and then there was the Amy Coney Barrett hearings.
Yes.
We saw a really specific, you know, example that you can look at. Okay, they were both asked about their religion.
Yes. Grilled on their religion.
Yes. And, you know, Democrats have been criticizing Republicans for asking KBJ about her religious beliefs, what kind of effects that would have on how she ruled from the bench.
Yeah.
It's as if they forgot that they tried to make ACB look like she's from The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
Like that was the narrative throughout those entire hearings.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you just look at the old tweet threads and everything was just, you know, Amy Coney Barrett is just part of the patriarchy.
Yes.
And she's just holding up the patriarchy like she's some, you know, first century BC cave woman.
Yeah.
And rightly so, though. I mean, as a supreme
good question.
Yeah, it's a worthy question to be asked. You know, how does your religion act upon your worldview, and how will that play into your interpretation of the law? That is an absolutely necessary question. Everyone should be asked that.
And when you're an originalist like ACB, it's clear that your religious preconceptions are not going to have any effect on how you rule in cases. When you're somebody like KBJ, who's spouting off this pseudo-religious nonsense about, oh, I don't know what a woman is. How could I possibly know what a woman is?
Right.
Yeah, your religious presuppositions are probably going to have an effect on how you rule on certain cases.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that has to be made clear in a confirmation hearing.
Yes.
That's what it's for.
And that kind of brings us to what we're going to talk about to wrap up this this show today, which is, you know, what does this so KBJ, you know, Manchin came out, basically said that he was going to vote to confirm, right? So she's going to be confirmed. She will be the next justice on the Supreme Court. What does that mean for the Supreme Court? Take it away, Abby.
It means, in so many ways, I think it means just more of the same of what's...
Yes.
I mean, most cases that are coming before the court are abortion and gay rights related.
Yeah.
Those are always the big ones.
Yeah.
And I think with KBJ being on the court, this just gives more firepower to the left to, you know, keep trying to keep the abortion cases strong.
Yeah.
For pro-choice. She is very pro Roe v. Wade. And then as far as, you know, any definitions of sexuality, And
yeah, as those trans cases start to,
right.
they're eventually going to trickle up to the Supreme Court. That is
Right.
going to happen at the rate we're going right now.
Right, and there's already trans cases in the court systems that will start working their ways up, of those defining questions of what does it mean to be a man or a woman.
Yes.
And then what rights can you claim based off of that. And so I think as she enters the court, I think she's probably going to be very pro-trans.
Yeah.
Which puts a lot of people like the medical community, for instance, into a tough position of how to handle transgender healthcare and transitions and things like that.
Yep.
And I predict her coming out in pretty full support of that.
The transitioning of underage children, that's the huge cultural issue that's it's also probably going to start making its way into the courts a lot more in the coming, decade or two. But yeah, she's replacing another liberal justice, so it's not, end times or anything like that. Nothing to be that worried about. But, these trans issues, these, women's rights issues, defending the sex-based rights, this whole country was built on the idea. One of the ideas that this country was built around was that there are certain realities, there are certain things that are self-evident,
right?
Including one of those things would probably be what is a man and what is a woman.
Exactly.
This justice has pretty much confirmed to us that she buys into this ideology, this pseudo-religious belief that a woman is whoever says they're a woman.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that could have some dire consequences as some of these cases start to make their way up.
Yeah, and I think it will continue to take a toll on American society and law as a whole of just being subject to extremely biased and subjective interpretation.
Yeah.
We're losing any sort of objectivity and unbiased truth.
Yeah, and these the Supreme Court, its intention is to interpret the Constitution, all right? And then if there's something in there that needs to be changed with the changing times, that's where we go to Congress,
right.
Okay? With more people being, nominated to the court of KBJ's ilk, the Supreme Court is changing into a group of judicial activists who are just changing laws willy-nilly and totally subverting the system that our founders created.
Exactly.
So on that note, I think unless there's any final points we'd like to push out there.
That's some doom and gloom.
Some doom and gloom.
That's per usual, just,
Yeah. And there's a lot of hope out there, guys. She's replacing another liberal justice, so we still have about the same numbers that we had going in. So it's not a disaster, but something to keep your eye on and something to look out for going
Always
forward.
Keep an eye on the Supreme Court.
And on that note, thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Make sure to follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/WJLive. Go ahead and follow us on Rumble. We're trying to circumvent YouTube a little bit by going to Rumble at the Western Journal on Rumble. And if you really want to help us out, if you really want to subvert big tech and just, help us overcome a lot of the throttling they do, whenever we do a story about trans issues and whenever we say things like a man is a man and a woman is a woman, YouTube, Google, Facebook, all those platforms come after us. They try to demonetize us. They claim that we've broken some sort of hate speech guideline. So if you want to help us circumvent that, please consider subscribing to the Western Journal at westernjournal.com/join. You're gonna be able to see exclusive content that we're putting out on that site or on that behind our paywall. And really, it's the reason you should want to join. We're going to give you plenty of extra little nuggets, plenty of exclusive content for you to join. But the reason to do it is to just be part of the movement, be part of, helping us fight back against big tech, helping us fight back against censorship, making sure we're trying to make sure your voice is told. Help us do that. Consider joining. And on that note, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys on Monday.